welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam on this very cold Thursday morning. How's everyone doing? Last night there was a new episode or yesterday at some point there was a new episode of The Dropout, so let's discuss that. So if you missed the first episode we did about The Dropout is this pretty cool true crime series. Well, it's about fraud. I mean, true crime typically is like homicide, more than anything else. So to say that it is true crime is not incorrect, because it is about a crime, but it is it is not what you would usually think about true crime. The story of Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos, and the rampant fraud that happened with it. Now, let's talk about this episode. This episode is about the deal that she struck in the late 2000s as the housing market was crashing and the recession was starting to take hold with Walgreens, and how she managed to strike that deal. Now, as we reach this point in the story, the show isn't doing this. I don't think the show is doing this intentionally. But it is painting everyone who she gets involved with, who is eventually defrauded by her, as almost willfully ignorant. And it makes a lot of the companies and a lot of the people and a lot of everything that goes on look really dumb for not catching the problems. Granted, we also are getting an omniscient point of view, as, with the benefit of hindsight, we are able to see everything going on. We are able to see all the sketchy shenanigans that are happening, and then we are seeing everything there. But in this episode, it's all about how she managed to wrangle the Walgreens people into this kind of huge deal. To put, Theranos labs into Walgreens stores. And it's, they have this thing where it's like, they talk about, we're never going to do anything like this. Like, it's not going to work. And cut to now, and they have LabCorp in a bunch of stores. And it's like, oh, well, it's kind of the same thing. It's just not outright a scam. But, it's one of those things where it was to offset the cost of, the retail space. They would lease out part of the space and get paid for it from outside companies. So they were leasing out, space to Theranos to do that. And then you would think that, after that happened, 10 years later, you wouldn't be like, you know what, let's do that again with LabCorp. It's one of those things. And I don't know. So, and the other thing is, it's the show can't really make up its mind when it comes to portraying Elizabeth Holmes' motivation. And I think that's kind of a problem, for me at least, where we're watching this, and we're seeing it unfold, and we're seeing basically the fact pattern laid out in front of us. And it smells like dog shit in that one spot very strongly. I'm driving as I record this as usual, and it smells like dog shit in one particular stretch of road. Anyway, it's one of those things where it's like, why is she doing this? What is the end game of her fraud? Is she just, is it like a pyramid scheme? Because that's how it appears sometimes, where it's like, oh, she's not doing it for, she's doing it for personal gain. She's doing it where it's designed to, there is no actual, product. The blood testing thing doesn't actually work, that's how it appears sometimes. But then other times, they're working on building something, and it's just, she's committing fraud like a pyramid scheme, where it's eventually it'll work, and we just need money to get that to work, and then when it works, everything will be fine. But then because it never does work, that's where the whole thing kind of falls apart. kind of, an interesting thing that they have to make up their mind about. Because that's kind of a key piece of information, is why is she doing this? Why is she going to such great lengths to commit this fraud? And, at this point, the machine doesn't work. And it still doesn't work. And we are now, years into this endeavor. And it is still this idea that, they don't have, there is no explanation as to what her end game is for this. She says repeatedly she wants to help the world, so I lean toward the latter explanation, where it's not just a personal get-rich, scheme. Like, the way that she'll portray this, she wants to do the right thing, and she's trying to do the right thing, and she's doing this almost producer's style, plan to finance this idea and pay scientists and pay all these people to do things. But it just doesn't quite add up in a real way. Like, it doesn't, that's my big thing. It's if that's what she did, and she was like, oh, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is going to work, and this is not going to work, and, and then we get to, the end of the story, and it's just, she ran out of time and got investigated, and that's how the whole thing kind of fell apart. There's probably a case to be made that there was some element of sexism involved in why the case was brought against her in the first place, because it's not an uncommon business practice for companies to do that. It is totally, it's wrong to do it, and it is fraud. I'm not saying it's not fraud, but to say it's this unique thing that only she does, that'd be naivete to say that. And it's an interesting kind of question. And as the story unfolds further, and if you want, you can listen to, there's a podcast called The Dropout, where you can listen to more about the story and kind of continue along before we get to the end of this version of it. It's, it's one of those things where it's she is using classic con man tactics on these people, playing Safeway against Walgreens, and then, when she's like, all right, fine, neither of you are going to do it, that's fine by me, and then she goes, and then she goes to Walgreens, says, no, we're not going with you, we're going to go with someone else, then Safeway says no, and then she's like, okay, well, I'm flying to Boston, and then the Walgreens guys are like, wait, isn't CVS's headquarters in Boston, or an hour outside of Boston? So, it's one of those things where it's she's just playing them against each other to make it so that way they get a better deal and they pay a lot of money and, all of that. I will say, as someone who worked for Walgreens for a good amount of time, the production design of Walgreens is headquarters and offices, pretty spot on. I didn't work in the headquarters, but they would always show, it is very reminiscent of the videos that they show you, hi, we're Walgreens, and then they show you, the videos of what's going on, in the headquarters, and they do a pretty good job of recreating that, so I gotta give them props for that, and all the signage is accurate, and they are very particular about that at Walgreens, and they're also very big on the past. They were very, that was very accurate too, them being all about the history and all of that. Both companies I worked retail for had very weird, things that went back to the past. JCPenney, I worked there for a little bit, and, to this day, if you manage to find a JCPenney store that hasn't gone out of business yet, they do not have dimes in the store. Unless a customer were to come in and pay with exact change and hand you a dime, they do not have dimes. And I found this out because they don't tell you this in training, because it's fucking batshit. But when you're at the register and you pop the register for the first time and you're like, oh wait, I don't have dimes. So you write down a little change thing and you go over to the woman in the other department where where the change till is, and you're like, hi, I need this change. She's like, oh, we don't have dimes. And I'm like, how do we not have dimes? That's pretty important. And keeping in mind, this is before the shortage we're in now that was COVID related. This was 2015, and I go over there and I'm like, well, why don't we have dimes? And she goes, well, the founder of the company had a feud with Roosevelt, and refused to carry dimes because Roosevelt was on the dime. And I'm like, that's just fucking insane. Like, how the fuck is that normal? And it's like, Walgreens has a lot of, like, we've been around since 1900 whatever, and it's like, alright, whatever. It's like, they hang their hat on their longevity, and then that's cool and all, and, but yeah, it's like, and the thing is, too, it's like, I know I'm getting off on a Walgreens tangent here, but, like, I wonder if the press people, or like, the media contact people, I used to have the number saved, not in my contacts, but in a note on my phone, because anytime something would happen, we would have to keep we would give that information to the press as needed, because we weren't allowed to comment on anything. But what would happen is, like, every day there'd be a news story that comes out of one of these companies, like Walmart doing something, and Walmart getting bad press over doing something. And every time I would see that, I would think, like, I wonder how, like, does Walgreens have, like, are they like, oh shit, is it going to come out that we do that too? Like, one of the things that would, I worked up until, like, I went up to supervisory, and I was up to assistant manager, and it's one of those things where you have to sign this waiver for breaks, and I saw that it kind of, it was one of those things that they did the same for, like, Domino's had something like that come out recently, where it's like, you have to sign this waiver saying that you waive your right to take breaks. And it's one of the things where it's like, I signed one of those waivers in 2016 when I got promoted. Like, is that something that, like, hourly employees, well, I was hourly too, but, like, the employees who work at the store level, at the entry level positions, they get breaks, but then once you hit supervisory, you don't, because typically they only keep one supervisor and two floor staff in the store at any given point. And that was the other thing too. It's like seeing all of these reports that come out about, Walgreens is closing stores because of theft. I'm like, bullshit. It's not because of theft. They're blaming theft, but that's not the case. It's like, one of the big things about the district that I was in was, like, one store kept the district afloat. Every other store in the district did not turn a profit except for one. There was one store in the district that turned a profit. All the rest were operating at a deficit. And I'm like, how is this tenable for the long term? And then you see, like, oh, they're closing stores, and it's like, they're blaming theft. It's like, well, no, they're not they're blaming theft, but it's like, we were always told, like, don't lock anything up, just make it, just, don't interfere, just let people take. It's like, we get things that's so cheap anyway. Like, that was the big thing. It's like, we get things so cheap, why are we going to worry about people stealing it? The amount of, like, if they break one of the, the fixtures to hold something in place, or to lock it up, that's an expensive replacement. But if we just let them steal it and let them go, then, no harm, no foul. And it's one of those things where it's like, what the fuck? And it's like, I bought Christmas candles at work because I had Yankee candles for, like, half price one year, and to this day, the fucking inventory control sticker won't come off. And it's this giant, disgusting metal thing on the outside of this glass thing. It's disgusting. That's a tangent, though. But yeah, I don't shop at Walgreens anymore. It's one of those things where it's like, once you've seen how the sausage gets made, you don't want to, do that anymore. And the other thing was, it's like, at one point we had a woman come in and just berate, the person, the pharmacist, because she was on the phone while filling her prescription, because, one pharmacist and two pharmacy techs were doing 200 strips a day. Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. And it was so funny when they introduced the meal break, and it was like, oh, we're giving pharmacists meal breaks, and people were like, what the fuck? Why are you giving them time to eat? And even so, giving them a half-hour meal break on a 12-hour shift is not fair. That's not enough time. If you're gonna make them work 9 to 9, and you say, well, you get a half hour off in the middle of the day, That's not fair. That's still not fair. I'm sorry. But the other thing is, like, so this woman is just berating and yelling at this what's it called? This what was the word I'm looking for here? This pharmacist, and just berating her and being like, you don't know what you're doing. You're gonna mess up my order. And the thing is too, it's counting pills. Like, the pharmacist is usually not sitting back there mixing stuff. The pharmacist is usually just taking a bottle of pills, putting the bottle of pills into the little tray, counting out the pills, then recounting them. And it's not like you gotta sit there and be like, you gotta sit there and make the pills. Usually, I would say 99 times out of 100, they're not doing any mixing or anything. But the mixing does happen occasionally. But, so she's counting it out, and this woman just berating her. And the woman at the counter was Asian, or the woman who, the pharmacist was Asian. And she's like, why don't you go back to China or go work in a nail salon? Now, my boss hears this and goes over and intercedes on behalf of my pharmacist and tells the woman to leave, berates her, and is like, get out of my store. I don't want you to be here. You cannot treat my staff that way. And the woman complained. District manager comes down as a result of the complaint to talk to, to talk to my boss. And the response was not, you did the right thing standing up to the racist woman who was telling your pharmacist to go back to China. And, she wasn't Chinese. But the response was, you got to just let customers vent. You cannot kick customers out of the store for that. And my boss got in trouble for interceding on behalf of a staff member. And yeah. So, The Dropout. Great show. And it is really good about showing the corporate culture at Walgreens. Like, that was, I think, the big accurate thing, was the corporate culture at Walgreens. This idea that, they're kind of putting on this facade of everything's great when it's really not. Like, they're, the company's not doing tremendously well. And it wasn't doing tremendously well during the time I worked there. And it's still not. I mean, and it's like, at one point, they're like, Walgreens still has to fax with physicians to get their to get prescriptions in, and I'm like, this is 2008 or 2009, maybe 2007, and it's like, yeah, they still do that to this day. We have an electronic system, but still, pharmacists need to fax stuff fairly regularly. So yeah. Also, they don't have a scanner in the office, something that always bugged me. Because, like, if you needed to scan something in, you needed to take it to pharmacy, act like you were going to fax it in one of the pharmacy printer, or one of the, prescription scanners, and then save it to the desktop, and then, email it to the store's email, and then email it to whoever you needed to email it to. Like, it was not an easy process to scan something. They had the suggestion box too, and they never took my ideas. They introduced the idea for the designated hitter position, which is just an idea to cut costs, where it's like, rather than pay a pharmacy tech the pharmacy tech's wage, you pay a floor staff person a pharmacy tech's wage, so that not a pharmacy tech's wage, but like a what's it called, like a little above, like in between floor staff and pharmacy tech, because pharmacy tech can go up to 17, floor staff can be whatever minimum wage is, and rather than pay that and have two people, you have one person who can just cross in between the two, and it's like, okay, well, I get it, like, you're trying to cut the cost of having that extra person, but you're short-staffing both sides of the equation here. And they were constantly cutting hours. Oh my god. Like, they were cutting hours to the point where it's like, we can't make do with what this is, and then it's not like you can hire other people to, you know, absorb the workload, because you didn't have consistent hours for them to work, and they wouldn't want to stay for someone who's like, yeah, we'll call you, you know, you may get 1 or 2 days a week, you know. It's just one of those things where corporate kind of fucked the stores on a regular basis, and it's just kind of ridiculous. The only store that didn't manage to turn a profit during a fucking pandemic, like, it's ridiculous. Anyway, The Dropout. So if you're not watching The Dropout, The Dropout is very good. It's on Hulu, and new episodes come out every Wednesday, it seems, because I watched a new episode last night. That was episode 4. I don't know how many episodes there are, but we gotta be getting close to the end now, because we are in the 2010s, and I think 2017 is when, you know, anytime we see her getting deposed, it is 2017, so we are rapidly hurtling towards the end of the story. Maybe 2 more episodes, and then we get to the trial. 4, 5, 6, and then 2 of the trial, 7, 8. Yeah, I could see that. Or maybe it's 10 episodes. But yeah, that's where we're going to be, you know, headed towards. And it's interesting to see how this, you know, as someone who, you know, read a Wikipedia brief, it'll be interesting for me to see how this plays out, and what the final outcome of, you know, everything is, and what causes everything to unravel. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of it, as we start to see fired employees be like, well, we're just going to go out and blow the whistle and violate the NDAs. I think that we're going to start to see where that comes from. So we'll wrap up with that. The Adam Project this week, Turning Red this week. Turning Red comes out tomorrow, I think. Yep, Turning Red comes out tomorrow. So we have all of that, and I feel like there's more than that, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head. So until then, have a great rest of your week.